Good day and welcome to this edition of Big Ideas in Supply Chain. My name is Ann Robinson. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Kinaxis. I'm joined today by Tracy, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Colgate-Palmolive. And today we're going to be talking about the relationship between sustainability and supply chain innovation. So Ann, welcome. I'm so glad to be able to have this conversation with you.
I'm delighted to be with you today, Ann.
Let's start off by maybe give us a little bit of your background, because you are currently the Chief Sustainability Officer, but that's not how you started your Colgate career.
It's been a journey. It's been 32 years at Colgate, a long time. And it may sound cliche, but I've always continued to learn. I've had the good fortune of working across all of our 4 core categories, which are certainly oral care, but also personal care, home care, and pet care all around the world in the supply chain. So most of that time, over 32 years, was working in different roles across the end-to-end supply chain, from manufacturing through to customer service and logistics. And then I was last based on a division team in Europe, and I was asked to come back to headquarters in New York to head up supply chain strategy and global sustainability.
Okay.
And we can talk more about this in a minute, but clearly there's a lot of overlaps. There's a heavy dependence on our supply chain to deliver the targets we've set for ourselves. And in fact, you could say that our sustainability program really started in the supply chain. So more on that in a minute. So at that time, I started building our 2025 strategies, both for supply chain, we call it our reimagined supply chain strategy, and our sustainability and social impact strategy for 2025. I stepped back. I didn't do this by myself, by the way. I worked with many people across the company, of course, many subject matter experts. And I said, wow, we have a lot to do in sustainability. So I convinced our senior team that I should focus on that. So that's how I became the Chief Sustainability Officer. And I did that in the beginning of 2020.
Interesting. So right as the pandemic was taking hold. So that must have been an interesting time.
Yes. Yeah, we had to roll our strategy out, all our strategies out virtually, which was interesting.
Sustainability has really bubbled up as being a critical topic. You can hardly have a conversation with a new graduate or an investor, or just bubbled up to be even a cocktail topic. What's really been the impetus for this? What, in your perspective?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's many stakeholders that are standing up and paying attention. And I mean, the overall impetus, I think, when we think of sustainability, and we can talk more about our strategy in a minute, but it's not just environmental, it's also social and climate justice and things like this that we're starting to try to figure out. But I think a lot of it is, all about, we have finite resources on this earth, and we're all using them and consuming them, and in many cases having a negative impact on biodiversity, on nature, climate. So the climate warming is because of our impacts, and the science is real, and I think there's lots of evidence out there. I mean, just 5 years ago, you would hear a lot of differing opinions. I think mostly today people don't disagree that this is real and this is something we have to do. And this is why all these stakeholders that you mentioned and companies like us have to feed many mouths, if you will. We have the investors, as we said. We have our customers, the retailers, demanding to understand what we're doing to reduce our impact as a company. And we have, of course, the consumers voting with their wallet, and they want to understand what the company's doing. And I think one of the most important stakeholders is our employees, and of course our board as well. And like you said, the younger generation are making decisions on what companies they join based on their purpose, based on what they do. And I mean, we know that's really escalating.
The majority of our viewers for these podcasts are really coming from supply chain backgrounds, and you and I have been bantering on this topic on whether or not to be able to reach these forthcoming, whether they're regulations or expectations or self-imposed goals around sustainability and ESG. Is supply chain innovation mandatory necessity to be able to reach those goals and to be able to really tackle those forthcoming regulations?
Yeah, I don't see how we can move forward without true innovation across the company. And if you chunk it down or think of the supply chain as part of the full value chain.
Right.
So starting with working with our suppliers, I presume most of your viewers have heard of scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1 and 2 is our own operations, our equipment use, our emissions, and our energy use. And then scope 3 is what's outside our operations, like our suppliers, purchased goods and services, logistics, and even downstream when our consumers take our products home and use them. To tackle all of that, because there's emissions and even social impact and impact on biodiversity and nature at every step of our chain, right? So we will not be able to tackle it without innovation. The onset of electric fleets, for instance, great innovation. Much of the equipment in our factories today is much more not only efficient, but more sustainable than in the past. And now we happen to be building a new factory in Kansas for our Hills business, and we're making that a smart factory. So it'll be much better connected, much easier to harness the data. So these are all innovations, and the innovations can come in many forms, shapes, and sizes, whether it's the equipment or how we move our products or even the materials we use in our products, partnering with suppliers. But also the tools, like Kinaxis planning tools, are really important. And we're very much looking forward to your ESG launch and bringing that in to help us measure and harness the data. So in sustainability, I mean, the data is fundamental. You have to have data that's granular, that's reliable, and it can be verified. It can be audited. With regulations coming, now we're going to have audit-ready data, just like we do our financial data, which is scary but true. So you need good tools and systems. And so there's lots of room for innovation there as well.
How important is the circular, sort of thinking about the circular supply chain and being able to accomplish this? And I know you at Colgate-Palmolive have some really good examples of where you can start thinking of tangible examples of circularity. Can you describe a little bit of that and where you've seen those values?
So let me frame first our strategy real quick.
Okay.
Our strategy is actually really simple, and I learned that when you want to build a simple strategy, that's really hard to do. But we wanted something that spoke to everyone in the company. So we have what we call 3 ambition pillars: driving social impact, helping millions of homes, and preserving our environment. Driving social impact is about our own employees' health, well-being. It's about strengthening our DE&I programs, and it's about the work we do in our communities. We have a big flagship program called Bright Smiles, Bright Futures, which brings oral health and hygiene to children all over the world in underserved communities. So that's relevant for Colgate. It also turns them into Colgate users, which is great. Helping millions of homes is about designing more sustainable products and helping people be more sustainable at home by using those products. And then preserving our environment. We have 5 actions there on climate, on water stewardship, on responsible sourcing, on zero waste facilities, and eliminate plastic waste. So under those 3 pillars, there's actually a total of 11 actions and close to 50 targets that we've set for ourselves. Now, with that in mind, that's a lot. There's a lot to do across all that space. So we have lots of smart people working respectively on those things in the company, but we use a metaphor called swords and shields. And because we want to focus, we can't lead in everything, but we want to strategically select where we want to lead. So the shields are things we do because we need to, whether it's a regulation or something to reduce fees and taxes or so on and so forth. We shield ourselves from reputational risks, for instance. Swords are where we want to lead. So we've carefully chosen just 3 swords. One is that Bright Smiles, Bright Futures program, helping bring oral health to kids. And then Another one is climate, the work we're doing around climate to reduce our impact and hit net zero carbon by 2040. The third one, which we actually consider an existential issue for us, is eliminate plastic waste. Because if you think about it, all our products are in plastic today.
Yes.
That's a lot of plastic. So that's one we are tackling by designing or innovating in new ways. So there's no silver bullet. We're pulling multiple levers. One is to use recycled content. So that's a circular way of, we buy quality plastic that's been used before but ground up, and we can put it back in our bottles. We're doing a lot of that. We are looking at alternative materials. We're involved in some studies on composting. We're looking at reuse models. We're looking at just making everything. We have one of our targets is to become recyclable in all our packaging by 2025. So that's why we had to introduce the recyclable toothpaste tube, because that's a big part of our business, as you may know. So we began work on that actually in 2015. So it's been a journey to bring that to market and to do it right. And that's an area we wanted to lead in.
So that is an innovation in product design.
Right. But it also impacted our supply chain.
And in supply chain, and particularly the reverse chain, if I understand correctly, and being able to take those tubes back and then ensuring that they could in fact be recycled. And you went as far as, and I will say this is, from my perspective, a real social innovation, was making the blueprint available.
Sharing the technical.
That's right.
Sharing the technology, right. We happen to make most of our own tubes. So there was a whole supply chain overhaul. We even make what we call the laminate, which is what the tube's made out of. So it was a big investment in our supply chain and involved many, many people cross-functionally in our supply chain to make it happen. And as you point out, making the tubes and putting them out there, the job doesn't stop there, because there's this whole value chain following that of what happens to the tube after people take it home and use it. And so there's a lot of education of the recycling infrastructure, even in countries that don't necessarily have formal recycling infrastructure, but many of them have a pretty organized informal picking system.
Collection capabilities.
And then you have to take into consideration human rights and what's going on there, and making sure that, nothing wrong is going on, and that it is a valuable livelihood for some people. And so we want to make the tubes part of that stream.
So I think this is one of many examples of things that Colgate has going on right now in this. You're a big powerhouse company. What about smaller organizations? If they want to start, they recognize they have a supply chain, they would like to put targets out there, they might even be imposed targets by these regulatory bodies. How do they get started, and what might be, it's not easy, but what are some ways that they could start getting some quick wins to build momentum towards being sustainable, but at the same time, we spoke about before, you're not going to do that at the expense of profit, of
margin, and
exactly.
Yes, no, and that's really important actually, because we do have a business to run. So it's how do you coexist, and oftentimes sustainable choices, if you're just getting started, there's a lot of sustainable choices you can make across your operations which actually save money. I think I had mentioned earlier, more efficient boilers, heat exchangers, things of that nature that are better for your factory because it's more efficient but also more sustainable. And maybe it reduces the amount of water you have to use or the heat you have to use or whatnot. So that's how it...
So a relative improvement.
Yeah.
Right?
So it improves. That's how we went about reducing our emissions in our factories. Just a lot of it was more efficient equipment. The supply chain plays a huge role in driving a lot of that effort, a lot of that innovation, a lot of that upgrading. But what I would tell companies that are just getting started, look in your supply chain for the environmental stuff. What I would always recommend is start with what's called a materiality assessment for sustainability. So you have basically all the ESG issues, and then you map them on a the world's moving to something called double materiality, but just to get started, you map on the y-axis what's most important and relevant for all those stakeholders I mentioned, and then on the x-axis what's most important for your business. Because you can't tackle everything all at once. That's kind of how we came up with our swords and shields to a certain extent. So pick where you want to start. Don't do it all at once. Don't boil the ocean. And then partner. There's lots of great organizations out there that don't break the bank. There's NGOs, there's CEO-led trade associations. Like we're part of the Consumer Goods Forum. We're also part of WBCSD, which stands for World Business Council for Sustainable Development. They bring together like-minded companies, small and large, where you can learn a lot and partner. So I think, going outside and partnering is really key. Focus and partner.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. So I really appreciate you sharing. Thank you to all of you who spent your time listening to us. And if you'd like to learn more about Anne, about her team, look in the podcast notes and we'll have additional links available there. Thanks so much. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Anne.